Hi, my name is Gabriela Castillo, and I will be talking about a famous author that was considered to be the forerunner of the feminist authors of the 20th century, Kate Chopin. Born Catherine O'Flaherty on February 8, 1850, in St. Louis, Missouri. Kate became a very important figure in feminist literature. Catherine O'Flaherty was of Irish and French descent. She was the third of five children. Her sisters died in infancy, and her half brothers died in their early 20s. After her father's death, she became very close with her mother, grandmother, and great grandmother, which I think was one of the reasons she was very in touch with females, female and the feminist movement in her literature. She also became an avid reader of fairy tales and poetry and graduated from the Sacred Heart Convent. She went on to marry Oscar Chopin, hence the last name, and settled with him in New Orleans and had six children. After Oscar Chopin died in 1882, Kate was left with a $42,000 debt, which right now would be about $420,000. She tried to keep her husband's business afloat, but ended up listening to her mother and moving with her mother back to St. Louis and leaving her financial troubles behind. A year later, her mother died. After her long life of death in her family, the death of her husband and mother really buried her in a deep depression. A family friend who happened to be a doctor recommended that she start writing as a sort of therapy. So Kate started writing in the early 1890s with short stories and articles that appeared in periodicals. In 1899, her second novel, The Awakening, was published, but very ill received by critics because it promoted values that conflicted with the acceptable behavior that was expected of women in that time. The most offensive ideas referenced was motherhood, female sexuality, and marital infidelity. It was out of print for several decades due to this, but now is widely available and very critically acclaimed because of her excellent writing. Since the public didn't really appreciate her novels, she became discouraged and turned to short story writing, hence The Gentleman from New Orleans, which was one of her short stories. While visiting the St. Louis World's Fair, Kate suffered a brain hemorrhage at age 54 and died 3 days later. When speaking about her literary themes, she was very influenced by her life in Louisiana, so all her surroundings really show in her writing. Her short stories incorporated her unusual portrayals in that time as of women as their own individuals with their wants and their needs, something that wasn't really appreciated by society back then. She had a deep admiration for Guy de Maupassant, which shows in her writing, and her concentration and emphasis on women's lives and struggles in the Southern society really show up in what she wrote. Her surroundings included the abolitionist movement and feminism. The two novels that she wrote was The Awakening and At Fault. Her most famous work was two short story collections aside from The Awakening, which was Bayou Folk and A Night in Arcadia, and her work has been published in Vogue, Atlantic Monthly, Century Magazine, and The Youth Companion. Thank you very much for listening to my Kate Chopin biography. Have a nice day.